Listen up and shape up! Eyes on the target! Move it now! All units, we have movement on the ridge! Watch the perimeter! Send backup now!
Let's understand the complete story of India and China.
In June 2020, high in the freezing air of the Galwan River Valley, soldiers from two nuclear-armed superpowers clashed in the dark. But they didn't use rifles or missiles. They fought hand-to-hand in the freezing snow, using rocks and clubs wrapped in barbed wire. Dozens of soldiers died in the thin mountain air that night. This was a direct physical clash between the two most populous countries on Earth, both armed with nuclear weapons, fighting over land where almost nothing can survive. This map shows the thousands of miles shared by India and China. The central sector is settled, but the eastern and western edges are covered in overlapping claims. Here, the two nations do not agree on where the border exists. Instead of an internationally recognized border, they are separated by something called the line of actual control. It isn't a legal boundary. It is a highly militarized, shifting fault line that marks exactly where each army's physical presence stops. To understand why these two modern powers are trading blows over uninhabitable rocks today, we have to rewind to a time when this entire region was nothing but a blank spot on British maps. In the 1800s, the British Empire controlled India. Their administrators grew obsessed with keeping the Russian Empire away from their colonial borders. Between India and Russia sat Aksai Chin, a desolate plateau nearly 15,000 feet above sea level. In 1865, a civil servant drew the Johnson Line, placing the entire Aksai Chin Plateau inside British Indian territory. 34 years later, they proposed the McCartney-MacDonald Line, contradicting the first map by offering the exact same territory to China. British colonial administrators flipped back and forth between these two maps, based on whatever was diplomatically convenient at the time. They never officially ratified a final border with China, and they never bothered to send troops to actually guard the desolate plateau. This colonial indecision created a ticking time bomb, leaving behind two overlapping, legally ambiguous claims for a piece of land the size of Switzerland. The confusion repeated itself in 1914, this time on the eastern side of the Himalayas. British negotiator Henry McMahon sat down to divide British India from Tibet. This map of the eastern sector illustrates McMahon's solution. He drew a new boundary extending hundreds of miles east, following the highest topographical ridges of the Himalayan mountains to separate the territories. The Chinese government immediately rejected this proposed boundary, but the British and Tibetan negotiators signed the agreement anyway, locking it away and keeping it a secret for decades. When India and the People's Republic of China emerged as modern republics in the mid-20th century, they inherited a toxic cartographic legacy built on rejected lines and secret treaties. This is a map of the Xinjiang-Tibet Highway. In the 1950s, the Indian government realized that China had paved a massive 1,200-kilometer military supply route straight through the disputed Aksai Chin Plateau. Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru looked at the old British maps and insisted the territory had belonged to India for centuries. Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai fired back. He pointed out the border had never been officially delimited and demanded that India recognize the physical reality of China's presence on the ground. In October 1962, the dispute boiled over into open combat. Chinese troops attacked across the Himalayas, overwhelmed the Indian military, then abruptly declared a unilateral ceasefire, withdrawing back to their preferred lines. The 1962 war resolved absolutely nothing in international law. It simply froze the contradictory colonial maps into a hostile, physical standoff on the ground. Looking at the modern standoff, the numbers are immense. India currently has 225,000 soldiers stationed in the extreme altitude, directly facing off against China's massive Western Theater Command. To gain an advantage, China employs a tactic often called salami-slicing. They construct civilian villages, access roads, and military watchtowers inch by inch, absorbing disputed territory slowly enough to avoid triggering a full-scale war. This strategy triggered a months-long military standoff in the Doklam region in 2017, and it continues to drive the construction of new settlements deep inside the disputed borders of Arunachal Pradesh today. India has responded by matching the troop deployments soldier for soldier and rapidly blasting their own access roads and military bases into some of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. The cartographic competition has evolved into a physical race to build and occupy the most extreme terrain on the planet. Over the last 30 years, the two countries have formed joint working groups, signed multiple peace agreements, and set up direct military hotlines to manage the tension. Yet the physical violence continues to escalate. The extensive diplomatic paperwork stands in stark contrast to the heavily fortified border crossings, where armed patrols routinely stare each other down. None of these modern diplomatic mechanisms actually address the underlying dispute. They only manage the symptoms, leaving the original disagreement over where the border actually sits completely unresolved. The lines drawn by colonial mapmakers over a century ago have locked two modern superpowers into a high-altitude trap, where a single misstep over an imaginary line could spark a global catastrophe.